Good day, everyone. In this paper, we would like to present to you a project on experimental house building from a biographical point of view. By this, we mean a project that aims to look at the entire life history of a house, from its building, its birth, to its death, in this case, deliberate destruction of the house by fire. The house in question was baptized Horstervold House, and it had situated in a piece of woodland called Horstervold. The life of this particular house began in 2012 when it was built during field work. We had the following aims. We would try to reconstruct the house as close to the original house plan as we could. The focus was not to build the actual house as an end product, but on the building process. Another aim was to understand the entire chaîne d'opératoire. This implied that in our documentation we would have to link the materials, the tools, and the labor time necessary to build the house. Beside the students, a limited number of volunteers joined the project. Together they built the house, overseen by skilled craftsmen. This gave people interested in the past a wonderful experience and provided high-quality hands-on learning for our students. As we were interested to learn what it meant in the past to build a house like this, we documented the use of materials and the time every action took. We used only replicas of Neolithic tools of stone, bone, antler, and wood. By using these tools, we could experience and learn about the possibilities and limitations these implements present and the relationship users develop with these tools. To obtain answers to our research questions, it is imperative that we build the house with prehistoric materials and technology. It took some convincing, but in the end, the City Council allowed us to build the house without reference to modern building policies. We could build the house as it should be built without modern reinforcements. All building materials for Horstervold House were collected in the woods in which the building site is situated. All trees were cut down by students, sometimes very enthusiastically, and carried to the site. Oaks that grew on the other side of the pond behind the site were floated across. You can clearly see the difference between trees cut down by skilled users of stone axes and those cut down by beginners. But the students proved to be fast learners. Hazel trees were difficult to fell because they grew so closely together. Oak was lovely to cut down and shape with the stone axes as the chips dislodged easily, allowing for quick progress. We needed a mixture of clay and sand for the walls, reeds for the roof, and lime bark for bindings. Gathering reeds with Neolithic tools was a rather nasty, very slow job. Our students loved every part of the building process and didn't mind camping and cooking their dinner on an open fire, but the reed cutting almost provoked a strike among them. Lime bark was gathered in late springtime when the bark is easily peeled from the tree. It was dried for storage and rehydrated before use. Well, this is how a house like this takes shape. Posts were put in the post holes, measured out to match distances between the post holes of the original house plan. Beams were laid in forked posts, and laths were tied on with bark strips. Willow branches were woven into walls that were carried to their place and tied. Then they were filled and covered with daub made on the spot. Next, the roof was thatched using a method developed by Hans de Haas, who worked with us, one of the pioneers of living prehistory and prehistoric crafts in the Netherlands. In the first photo, a bundle of reeds is lifted to the workers on the roof using an ad hoc tool, a forked branch. We used many of these impromptu tools for a variety of tasks. They were mainly simple wooden tools. When the house was finished, it was used as an experimental center. Students of the archaeological science program undertook scientific experiments, and staff of the faculty did all kinds of reconstructive and other experiments at the site. The Forestry Service, in whose woods we built the house, used it for education. As a result of these activities, the site of Horstervold House became a small hamlet. For documentation, we used standard forms and recording devoid of mistakes. There were forms to document tool use and materials. These were some examples of the forms used for documenting the wood that was used. Each tree and each wooden part of the structure received a number so that we knew which parts of which tree were used where in the house. Because of the tool form, we knew which tool was used to cut that particular tree and who did the cutting and when. This way, we also knew the biography of each tree that was felled. Because all tools were to be part of the Leiden reference collection for microware analysis, we documented the use of tools and, when needed, recorded traces of wear on the tools by making casts. These could later be analyzed under the microscope. In this way, we documented the biography of each tool, including resharpening phases, breakage, and so forth. All this provided a ton of data, which was almost too much to handle. In 2016, we were commissioned to build another reconstruction of the same house plan for the new open-air museum at Massamuda in Vlaardingen. We documented the process in the same way as when building Horstervold House. When we compare the data of the two house building experiments, we come to the following counts. Use of materials is fairly similar, except the amount of reeds. The difference is due to the fact that the roof of the Massamuda house was thatched far more thickly than that of the Horstervold house. The reason was that the open-air museum preferred a house with a longer lasting roof. Smaller difference in felled trees and amount of loam is due to differences in working strategy favored by the master builders in charge of the house building. The amount of time spent is fairly comparable as well. More than half of the reeds we used for the roof of Oosterhout House were gathered using Neolithic tools. All reeds gathered for Massamunda House were cut mechanically, but still gathered and bundled by hand. The house in Massamunda was finished more neatly, and a number of details were of higher quality. The counts of 325 and 352 working days are days including the documentation. Approximately 40% of our time was spent on scientific work. All in all, we would estimate that a house like this can be built in approximately 20 working days. So, a group of 10 reasonably good workers can complete a house of this size within 3 weeks when using these materials. Obviously, there is a fair level of skill involved, but a project like this does not require expert knowledge or skill. This slide gives some information on tool use. Interestingly, not even 14% of working time during this experiment was spent using tools. Of course, large, time-consuming tasks like documentation, making wattle and daub walls, and thatching required no or little use of tools, but such a low percentage was a surprise to us anyway. Wooden tools like digging sticks were the most important tool category in terms of the time that they were in use. Many of these were so-called ad hoc tools. These were picked up, quickly made, used, and then discarded. They often ended up on the fire. There is a difference in time that flint chopping tools were used, but this is easily explained by the fact that there was a difference in the number in which they were available at the two experiments. In all probability, you cannot see this diagram on your computer screen in enough detail, but this is part of the schematic overview of the chain opératoire of building Oosterhout House. It shows the interconnections between the materials, the labor, and the tools used in the various stages of house construction. Micro-wear analysis of tools was an important part of this experiment. We recorded wear on tools of all kinds of materials, but it would take too long to mention all of them here. We will limit ourselves to one example. This is axe 2046, a quartzite axe that was used mostly for felling trees and shaping freshly cut wood. As these two pictures show, there is little development of wear traces on the edge, only a little polish. This is in contrast with the hafting traces, which developed quickly and proved to be a much better indication of the duration of use. The kind of polish visible in the top left picture also gives insight into the materials used for hafting. In the top two pictures, you'll see well-developed polish that is associated with the friction between the stone tool surfaces and the wooden handle. A few of these observations we mentioned already. Cutting down trees or shaping wood with Neolithic chopping tools is fairly easy to do and doesn't take a lot of time compared to other tasks. Stone axes and adzes, in this case made of basalt and quartzite, proved to be far superior to their flint counterparts. Stone tools remained sharp and suffered next to no damage. Flint chopping tools became blunt or damaged and sometimes even broke. When we used chopping tools on dry wood, even the stone tools lost their edge. This forced us to plan work better than is necessary when doing this work, with far sharper tools of steel or chainsaws. And even when a beam or rafter is still green, once it is added to the structure, it is very hard to make alterations on it as it bounces under the strokes of the tool. Another interesting observation is that students often had their favorite tools that they chose every time. They even hurried at the start of the working day to secure that particular tool for themselves. In general, female students used adzes while male students used axes, often the heavier ones. This gender aspect of tool use is intriguing. Many factors will probably have contributed to this outcome, and we will focus more time on this in future experiments. Unfortunately, Oosterhout House was little used for actual living in, and this may have influenced the nature and amount of necessary maintenance. The roof needed regular attention, especially the gable. The layer of loam, sods, or dung had to be repaired or renewed on a yearly basis. Walls, too, needed some attention now and then, and movable parts like doors proved to be a weak spot. But the most interesting repair was the renewal of a number of heavy posts. In 2017, we renewed a number of wall posts and one central post during fieldwork with students. It was surprisingly easy to replace them. A temporary support was used to prop and lift up the beam, and then the old post could be pulled out and a new one put in. The photo on the left shows the level of decay of the old post. It was rotted through and through. It didn't make much difference what kind of wood was used, by the way. The rate of decay was fairly uniform. These repairs had no noticeable effect on the structure as a whole, which suggested the lifespan of a simple house like this could easily be prolonged. Hence, the life expectancy of its posts seems to be an unreliable indicator of the life expectancy of the house as a whole. After 7 years of use, Oosterhout House had to go. There were no funds available to continue the maintenance of the site, and the house needed a new roof, which had been rather thinly thatched to begin with. We decided to burn the house down and record its demise. What we had hoped to learn was how a fire develops in a building like this, how hot the fire becomes, and what happens to the materials of which the house is built and the items that were inside the house at the time of the fire. The Regional Fire Brigade was enthusiastic when we approached them for cooperation and advice on safety measures. Their expert knowledge, combined with the information gathered by 6 barometers installed in the house, gave us a good knowledge of how the house fire progressed. Before lighting the fire, we furnished the house with a few benches, food, pots, and tools, and recorded where they were placed. A 3D scan was made to document the exact location of every item and the exact state of the structure itself. These are a few photos of the inside of the house just before the fire. As it had been raining for a long time before the day of the experiment, the reeds on the outside of the roof were soaked through. The inside of the roof, the walls, and the wooden structure of the house, however, were dry and in good shape. We started the fire by building a high fire in the fireplace. Just as an aside note, it is not easy to cause a fire to start by nothing more than a cooking fire. We had to stoke the fire far beyond what is normal to cause the roof to finally burst into flames. When the roof caught fire, a rolling flame moved very quickly along the ridge beam, and we had to evacuate the house quickly as expected. Over the fireplace, the fire burnt through the roof, causing a huge black cloud of smoke to appear. Within an incredible short time, the entire roof was on fire. The wind, blowing mostly from the west, fanned the flames, and obviously there would have been no chance of extinguishing them. A burning house like this is a lost house. Once the top part of the roof was consumed by fire, the flames became lower. Smoldering black reeds fell down and bindings were burning through. The rafters fell in a peculiar way. As the batten burned away and their bindings at the top burned through, they toppled down into the inside of the house, their butt ends sticking up over the wood wall beams. Where the thatching was covered by moss, especially on the north side of the roof, the fire slowed down and began to smolder. Large lumps of reeds fell down and lay smoldering and burning against the walls. Pieces of timber continued to fall as they or their supports were burned through. When the flames had gone out, the wood continued to smolder and sometimes burst back into small flames. This was still going on at the end of the day when we left the site. This final phase of the burn could not be registered, but lasted a long time. Especially where large pieces of timber lay on top of each other, the wood kept glowing and burning. Also, wood inside the walls was seen to smolder and burn where there were enough cracks in the loam to provide oxygen. These are the temperatures recorded by the data logger. The expected peak at the start of the fire when the thatch is burning is very high, almost 1,000 degrees. Cold air is sucked into the house as hot air rises and causes surprisingly low temperatures in other places. Accordingly to the fire brigade, this fire is typical of buildings with reed or straw covering. An important drawback of the barometers, like the ones we use, is that they record temperature very locally. This has to be taken into account when analyzing the results. A few bits of burning or glowing wood against the tip of the barometer can give a wrong impression of the heat in a wider area. This is how the house looked after the fire. As you can see, parts of the wall and many posts are still standing. Some fell unobserved during the next day or days as the fire continued to smolder. 3 months later, the ruins was already beginning to be quietly taken over by nature. We would have preferred to let some years go before excavating the remains of Holster Road House, but that was unfortunately impossible. 3 months after the fire, we began the excavation with students. We were able to locate and identify most of the wooden building elements and document their location after the fire and the state that they were in. Most of the stone tools, pots, and even one completely charred basket had been recovered. Samples of ash were taken for analysis. The results of the excavation still have to be further analyzed, and the next step, an overall analysis of all of the data and a reconstruction life of Holster Road House, still has to take place. We hope to publish a book about the entire project within the next year. If you would like to get in touch, please feel free to email us at the University of Leiden. Our house building experiments are still continuing at Masamuda Open Air Museum, where recently students helped to reconstruct a medieval farmhouse. Our work on Neolithic houses continues also in a new project called Putting Life into Late Neolithic Houses, investigating craft and subsistence activities through experiments and material analyses, with XARC as a partner to disseminate our experiments and laboratory results. Thank you for your attention.